just so there's a record of it. So there we are, we're recording. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for spending your Thursday evening with us to talk about a very fascinating, complex, and beautiful subject, AfroLatinidad. We wanted to do this kind of as in honor of Black History Month, and we are so happy to have two alumni, a current student, and our founding assistant principal here. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves, and then we're gonna go through a couple of different themes that came up in our pre-conversation that I think folks will like hearing about, and then we'll have some time, a little bit of time for questions and answers at the end before we bid adieu and let you know when the next one is. So with that, I am going to turn it over to founding AP, Jenny Rodriguez. So Jenny, over to you, please. Just name, pronouns, and kind of, your role.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jenny Rodriguez. I was one of the founding members at Wheels. I was the founding assistant principal for the high school, founding members for the high school, I should specify. And I go by she, her, and hers pronouns. And I'm happy to be here with everyone.
Thank you. Carla, do you want to go next?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. How is it not Friday yet? My name is Carla. I'm a member of the Wheels alumni class of 2013. And my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm excited to be here. I'm a very important member of the community.
There's no objections there. Yohely, over to you, over in Connecticut.
Hi, I'm Yohely. I graduated Wheels in 2020. I am a Wesleyan now, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Great. And then Angel, take it home.
Hi, hello. I'm a current Wheels senior at the moment. I graduate this year. My name is Angel Perez, pronouns he, him.
Great. So yeah, like I said, I'm just kind of the background noise here. So when we all got together to talk about what we wanted to, what we wanted this evening to look like, a couple different themes came up, and I think we're gonna go through them in turn. So I'll just tease them and then we'll get into them. So the first thing we're gonna talk about tonight is unlearning, in the context of AfroLatinidad, is unlearning the whitewashed / colonialist history that many of us grew up with around this subject. Then we'll move on to familial and societal pressures around AfroLatinidad. Third, we'll talk about exploring one's own identity in a colorist world. And then lastly, we'll end with appropriation and accountability within the community itself. So yeah, let us start with unlearning whitewashed and colonialist history. I know this came up with each one of you talking about, like, there were several aha moments you've had in your own life. So I don't know who wants to start us off. I don't want to call anyone, so I'll just let someone jump in here.
Well, I guess I'll go. So I am a Latin American Studies major here at Wesleyan. Well, I'm a double major, but like I'm in Latin American Studies, and currently I'm in this like one required course, is the only required course, and it's taught by this like old white man that doesn't know Spanish, and it's taught in Spanish. And like we're learning about Simon Bolivar and like your regular like liberators of Latin America, and like all of them are white. All of them also happen to be slave owners. And just being taught by a white man who clearly does not really want to go into the history of race in Latin America is so hard, because it's like, bro, like you've been teaching for 30 years, like you could at least try a little bit more. And when I like bring it up, when I bring race, he'll just be like, oh, excellent comment, Yohely. And then he'll be like, moving on. And then he just like, that's it. He just praises the comment and like does not address it, or he makes excuses for the people that I'm calling out. So like 2 days ago, we were talking about Simon Bolivar, and how Simon Bolivar used to say that like Latin Americans are slaves to Spain. And I was like, well, that's really hypocritical of him to say when he actually owned slaves. He's not a slave to Spain. And the professor was like, oh yeah, like nice comment. But he apologized for it and he promoted emancipation later on in his life. I was like, okay, cool. So I don't know. It's hard out here. So yeah.
I think two things about this. I think that, yeah, I mean, I went to a predominantly white high school, private school in Connecticut, Johnny, so I get it. And yeah, every part of history was whitewashed. I think that you know, the course that taught me them, I was very fortunate because in elementary school, I had all Latino teachers and Puerto Rican teachers, and they really did introduce us to Afro-Latino history in a way that I didn't realize until I was older that that was not the norm. So we learned dances like bomba and plena and things like that. But it was really not till college that I had, you know, it was African American Studies class, African American Studies 101, that totally transformed the way I saw history. And I was always like, if I had been taught history this way, I would have been a history major and would have loved history. But it was the first time that I was actually taught certain things. And then as the years went by, I was fortunate enough to be able to learn more. I think the challenge in Dominican culture is that Dominican, like in DR, history has been so whitewashed. So our parents don't really know the accurate history, which gets really awkward because how can I, who lived here since I was 3, tell people who were born and raised and went through the school system in DR, you know, that what they've learned is wrong, or has a European lens to it. So it makes it that much harder for us when we get here, where, you know, the one drop rule has always stood, right? So for me, if you had to choose in a society to be Black or white, I would always be Black. It makes it really hard to, you know, we're going to talk a little bit more later, but that clash with your family because we don't, and it roots itself and we don't know the history. And then lastly, I think that, you know, though I said this before when we were meeting, though I felt like we did a lot of things right at Wheels in the context of what we were trying to do, which was completely new to New York City. This idea that everybody would apply to college and everybody would have a place to go to. But with that, one of the things that I don't feel like we did do well was really unpack what it meant to be Dominican and the different racial identities of being Dominican. And the reality is that most of the teachers were white. So I could understand how the challenge, right? Like the challenge for them, you know, in 2009 and 2010 to feel comfortable enough to have those conversations. But I do think that that was a missing piece, even though one of the things that I never experienced in my life until Wheels was Dominican pride. And maybe it was like I didn't want to really rock the boat. But I've always been in the minority no matter where. I lived in the Bronx. I was one of the only Dominicans. So to be in a space where you all celebrated being Dominican, you know, like to a T, was beautiful. So, you know, yes, we could have done better. And that's where we were at the time, I think. And I'm glad to hear that kids are challenging things a lot more now.
Angel, Carla, anything to add before we shift gears? I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
I would like to say something.
Okay, go ahead, Melanie.
I think when talking like about like our identity, like in school, like what she was saying, it relates because like as Dominicans, we really don't know like the actual history behind what happened. So I feel like that's something that we like we have to like work on, because you know a lot of us are like, you know, Latinos, Afro Latinos, and like when learning about who we are, we should like be able to like know that part of our identity at least. So yeah.
I agree. And I think that's why I've been a little mute, and we spoke about this prior, but I am Dominican. And I'm still in the process of learning more about my history. So I'm at a place in my life where I don't like to speak too much on things unless I'm fully educated. And I don't know if that journey will ever come to an end, because I just think life is about continuously learning. But one thing I can say is that as far as my family is concerned, there has been sentiment, you know, towards factors like my hair. It's actually bigger than this, but you know, I sweated it out, so it's not that big. And you know, for a long time, I would hear from my mom saying, "Straighten your hair for this event so you can look formal or professional." And I believed that up until the past maybe 3 years, where I started wearing my afro out to interviews, and I thought of it as, I understand that a lot of I understand that as desperate as us Black and brown people may be to land jobs, I also learned that we don't have to compromise our identity to get that. Because if I have my hair straight in an interview just to, you know, I guess, quote unquote, impress you, I'm gonna show up to work the first day with my afros and I'm gonna surprise you. So I'd rather come as my authentic self. And even when I say authentic, I'm even speaking about my background, and more specifically being a Dominicana from New York. Like, I have a New York accent. And sometimes I try to suppress that a lot at work, because not at my current job, but other jobs, because, you know, I was afraid that it would be too ghetto or too ratchet. But these were just things that were embedded in us since young, because we just wanted to fit in or assimilate to white culture. But as time goes by, and I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to have many different life experiences and connect with people who think like me, I can finally feel more comfortable living in my truth. So I can say that a lot of us may have struggled with that and still do to this day.
I'd like to add one more point. I think for me, I heard Jenny say that there's a lot of pride in being Dominican in Wheels, and I do agree. But I also do think that, like, through my perspective, I think there's a lot of fixation on solely identifying with just Dominican. Like, I think for a long time in my life, I solely identified as Dominican. Like, you know, I'm not black, I'm not brown, you know, I'm just Dominican. So I think it's important for the school to not address just being Dominican, but the different ways to have like intersectional identities of being, you know, black and Dominican, being white and Dominican, or just there's the whole spectrum of what you could be plus being Dominican. And I think solely identifying with just being Dominican, like, ignores all the issues with that it comes with being Black and Dominican or being brown and Dominican. So I think people's obsession and fixation of solely identifying with it obviously stems a lot from the way that we're not taught about the intersections of, you know, race, ethnicity, and nationality. But I think if it was talked about more in school, I think more people would understand, you know, the issues that comes with being these identities and how to address them. Because if you don't see any issues of how the system is kind of like weaponizing you, then you'll never address the issues if you don't see the issue.
I think it comes in stages, right? So I am a product of the 80s. So and the big Dominican migration was in the 90s in New York. So we were the bottom of the barrel. You didn't want to say that you were Dominican. And so much of that is actually tied to color, right? Because even though I grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood, if you were a darker skinned Puerto Rican, your friends were Black. And if you were a light skinned Puerto Rican, you didn't want to have anything to do with Dominicans, right? So I think that the first layer for many of us in my generation that have been here that long, right? Is, oh my God, like, it's actually cool now to be Dominican, you know, and because we suffered a lot, like we went through a lot. You have no idea of the things that people said to us, the way we were treated. my family migrated to Puerto Rico first. My dad has, and left really fast, because my dad has so many stories and unfortunately, it's again, I think I learned early on that just using the term Latino did not really represent me, because some of the first people that discriminated against me were fellow Latinos. That said, I think that, yeah, so like we get then wrapped up in the like proving the greatness of being Dominican, and then we don't, so now we need to take it to that next level, right? Which is like, you could love and have pride in your culture and in where you're from, and still challenge those things. You know, there's a great like this woman who has an IG page who talks a lot about you know, the treatment of Haitians, for example, in the Dominican Republic and so on. And she gets so much hate and so much sentiment of being that she's anti-Dominican, and she's, even though she is Dominican. And I think anybody who brings it up gets that. And yeah, I agree with you, Angel. Like, I think it's the importance of understanding that in the cross-sectionality in this country, you know, and the different ways that we ourselves oppress ourselves because of we have subscribed to this, you know, to this system of I don't know, just the whole system of white supremacy culture. And I think that that's the challenge now for your generation. You know, I do remember, so my hair is also much bigger, it's wet right now, but I remember being at Wheels and kids saying to me like, oh, when are you gonna do your hair? You know, and I'm like, if you knew how long it took to wear my hair like this, you realize I do my hair. But the idea was that it needed to be straight. And you know, and a few times I tackled it, you know, the explanation, but that it's a lot to unpack. It's a lot to unpack. And you realize that unless a person is there to receive it, like as in that place where they receive it, it can be a challenge. I'm glad to see more of us embracing this aspect of our culture. However, sometimes I do wonder, because I feel like it's so wrapped into pop culture for some people, that I wonder if it's people are really understanding what they're doing, or it's a new moda, a new fad.
That actually transitions nearly perfectly into the talk around family and societal pressures around when to and when not to express your identity. So I know this came up quite a bit in our pre-conversation about family members, you know, delivering messages that took years to unlearn. So for folks that are willing and able to share some of those stories, just to give folks here an idea of like just the kind of continuum of how you have to decide to show up every day, and how taxing that can be.
Hello. Hi. I'm Yohely, by the way. But to agree with what Ms. Rodriguez was saying and Jeff, I also would want to say that like us as up and coming like adults and like young adults, this generation, I don't know if like that happened in the past, but due to like the stereotypes against like Afro-Latinos and stuff, a lot of us were like really like shut down and like we didn't speak up. But I feel like as like the years pass by, I feel like a lot of us as young adults, we're growing up a voice. And I feel like that will help. Like being Dominican is a pride. And of course you have to like express your culture. But one of those things is also like correcting your culture. Like when knowing that things are wrong and like things like you have to stand up. And I feel like us as growing up adults, we are bettering ourselves in that, and we're carrying more power in our voice and using our voice and like doing things, not just like saying them, but doing things to represent us. And yeah.
And thinking about like family, I think that for a lot of Dominicans, anti-Blackness starts in our home with like what was I doing as a 5-year-old getting my hair straightened? there was no need for me to do that. I'm 5. Let me go out and play. I don't know. Or like hearing like our parents or our uncles, aunts telling our cousins or our siblings like, oh, for me specifically, because I'm one of the younger kids in my family, like hearing the grown-ups in my family tell like my cousins or my brother or whatever to like bring someone lighter to the house, like that's where it starts. And as a kid, you're conditioned to think that your family is always right. So then when you grow up, it's hard to like deal with that generational like trauma and what you've been like taught to think.
And I think that there's a duality to that, right? So there's the standards of beauty that white supremacy culture has embedded in us. My family is actually, most of the older people in my family are really dark skinned and married light, which is pretty funny. But it's funny because of what I'm going to say next. But my grandmother, who was a gorgeous lady, like gorgeous, like, and she was very dark skinned, would say things like, oh, you know, sí, porque yo soy prieta y fea, pero, you know, like in defending herself, like in trying to, you know, like it's hard to statement to kind of translate, but it was like, in other words, she was saying like, even though society judges me as being dark and ugly, I'm X, Y, and Z, you know, I'm this strong woman. So it was really weird, like weird messages that I got, because like these women were gorgeous. They dressed to the nines, even though my family was very poor, but they knew how to like step out. And at the same time, they knew that society had certain views of beauty, which was interesting. And then there was the layer of, so nobody ever said to me like to bring a light skinned person or whatever, but there was a sense of, there was definitely that sense that, you know, lighter was prettier. I think DR bears the brunt of that, but it's any country that was colonized, right? So like we see it in Jamaica, we see it like other Caribbean islands where there is colorism, right? So there's like that layer of it. And then I think that the immigrant layer of it is the layer of not wanting to be identified as Black American. I think that this country has done a really good job at really painting a horrible picture of Black Americans here and internationally. And so I think that there was this idea. So I grew up in a Black and Puerto Rican neighborhood, and there were a lot of Caribbean folks that were like, do not call me Black. I'm not Black, I'm Jamaican. And there was that distinction that they wanted to make. And there's still people that do that, you know, so I feel like there was two things happening. Like sometimes because people criticize, oh, the Dominicans say that they're not Black. I think that like even a dark-skinned Dominican, at least back then, it wasn't necessarily that you didn't see your skin color. Like you understood your skin color, but you didn't want to identify as a Black American, which again comes full circle because part of that is not understanding the history. And, you know, in the summer of 2020, I got into a huge argument with my dad, who is my complexion, who I thought up until this point had really understood like the context of living in this country for 40 years and has shifted from being an immigrant. And I realized he had not. And, you know, it was still like not understanding that the doors that many Black Americans have opened up for us. And I kept saying, like, I'm like, but I wouldn't have the things that I have. I wouldn't be where I am for not the civil rights movement, for all these other people that came before us. That was lost on him, but also was lost on him the fact that I struggle at my job, at any place I've been to, at any school I've been to, that I have faced discrimination because people don't care that my last name is Rodriguez and they don't care that I speak Spanish. So that was also lost on a lot of Dominicans, leaving the context of being in a place like Washington Heights where you're the majority, and really realizing that actually it doesn't matter in this country. Like you could look like me, you can look darker than me, you could look like Carla, but have hair like Carla, and you will be Black. Like, if those are the two choices. And so much of that is, again, not understanding the history and not understanding our place in history and in this country as well.
And I'm thinking, I did a research, my AP research paper was about like this like Dominican identity and where this like whole thing came about. And it's mainly like, and I'm reading about it in my Latin American classes right now, of like creating this national identity that's so distinguished from Spain, but at the same time feeding into European standards of like whiteness and Blackness, and like a lot of Latin American philosophers or theorists like borrowing language or the work of the Haitian Revolution, but never giving it credit because, you know, that was led by Black people. So also that stealing of ideas and concepts in Latin America from Haiti, but never acknowledging Haiti.
Uh-oh, I think she froze mid-sentence. So we'll pass to someone. Carla, you're ready to jump in. You're ready to pick up the baton. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, thank you, Jenny, for sharing that. I can relate as far as it goes when our families would tell us, like, bring someone Fino home. For those that don't know what Fino means, just kind of someone with thin features, like small nose, small lips, light skin, straight hair. And I used to believe that for so long that I've always been attracted to Black and brown men, right? But like there was always this fear. I'm like, damn, like what if when I marry him, like what is my family gonna say? And this is me being like 100% honest of what I used to think before because of all the things that my family used to embed in me. But I definitely don't think like that anymore. And I set those boundaries with my family, and I'm like, get ready because it ain't gonna be what you want. But I will say that my family has been more accepting because I think that I've decided to kind of break those generational curses, and it's resulted in a lot of arguments and difficult conversations. But although my mom or like other family members didn't understand it at the moment, I do feel that with time it did resonate once they see it being put into practice, you know? And just like another thing I wanted to bring up really quickly, I'm in the process of looking for another job, and sometimes when I get to the section of what's your race, and then it'll ask like what's your ethnicity, you know, like for race, I do choose Black because I know I'm not white, right? And you know, I know that I do have descendants from Africa, but then when the next part comes, are you Hispanic or Latino? I'm like, I'm still confused as to like, I guess what the question is trying to impose. So yeah, it gets really tricky. And that's why I mentioned earlier that I'm still learning. So you know, I don't feel too comfortable speaking about this sometimes, but I think this is why we're having this conversation now in order to, you know, bring more insight and so I can learn more.
Oh, I was talking and I didn't even unmute myself, but I also want to add on saying that another thing that I've noticed as well is that the way like how Blackness is treated in like the Dominican community or even in like the house in my household differentiates between gender as well. I think that gender and like my race and like my nationality is pretty like, pretty close. I think that when misogynoir comes into the picture and like the way that Black women are treated differently opposed to Black men, it's pretty evident. I think with like especially within beauty standards, I think beauty standards for men, especially Black men, like for me, whatever, is obviously going to be very different from Black women. But I think a lot more pressure and a lot more like eyes on Black women. But like if you look at history, Black women are the ones that putting the most, like a lot of the things that we have now, if it wasn't for Black women, we kind of wouldn't have them now. And it's kind of like we never give back that credit, but then Black women are always the one that are the most bashed. So that's just something that I've been able to see as well. Like you know, there were a lot of comments that would had received, yeah, as a child, yes. But if I look into like my female black cousins or into like my sister or whatever the case may be, the comments were very different, like very different. Like, you need to do this for your hair, you need to wear this, you can't be wearing that, you can't show your body here, you can't show your body there. But like, yeah, I got comments on my hair too, but that was about it. That's, if you guys understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, that if I'll keep moving things along. But yeah, Angel, I know when we all first got together, you were the one that brought up accountability within the community, and how you've witnessed classmates. I don't know put words in your mouth, but you witnessed classmates kind of pick and choose when they want to show up as Black or not. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to share, because I know it's kind of created some uncomfortable situations between you and teachers. So I'm curious to know if you'd be willing to kind of talk through that situation to give folks an idea.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. I obviously know that the education system is obviously very whitewashed. That's like nothing new to me or anybody else, I hope. But I think for me at that moment, what the situation was that somebody had said the N-word in the classroom, like in front of everyone. So I addressed it, and the teacher got offended and addressed it to me and was upset at me for addressing it. And I'm not one of those people to look for like, to look for like, other people to, feel comfortable near me when it comes to me addressing that. I don't really care for that. I don't care to be approved. I'm gonna address it. I don't really care. So yeah, so when I addressed that, person saying the N-word when they're evidently not Black, yeah, it created tension towards me. And I think that in the school system, it needs to be more about, well, no, less about highlighting Black pain and more about highlighting, yes, this is what happened. We can take accountable, take those accountable for, what they did in the past. But how can we now take accountability for ourselves and see how are we perpetuating these same ideas and perpetuating these same colorist or racist ideologies. And instead of saying this person, that person, saying, how can I change? How can I stop doing these things? So I think if more education was spread on, you know, these different intersectional identities, then maybe more people would be open to taking accountability and how they're perpetuating those same ideologies.
Um, I know that teachers are on vacation, much deserved and much needed vacation, but and I know that you're recording this, Jeff, so I'm just hoping that some teachers get a chance to see this. I think that the beauty of Wheels, at least in the years that we were there, is that through the format of expeditionary learning and inquiry-based learning, now that I work at a school that is not at all inquiry-based learning, I realized the beauty in the fact that we taught Wheel students how to think critically about lots of different issues. And yet this was not one of them. And I think it is the comfort level of the adults. And I think it's very important for teachers to see this and to hear Angel's points. And there's no reason why. So I work now at a predominantly white school where kids struggle with what Angel just talked about a lot and have a lot through the history of the school. There's no reason that this should be the case at Wheels, in my opinion, given the fact that we teach children, and I still say we, I will always say we when I talk about Wheels, that we teach children to question, students to question so many things. I think that the closest to really talking about some of these issues was there was an expedition on stop and frisk in one of the grade levels where they did a whole thing on it. Yeah, Angel is raising his hand. But just like bluntly, just overtly talk about how this happens on a daily basis in classrooms, how, you know, the kids are the majority, right? But they still are navigating a world that is controlled by, or a curriculum that is controlled by, you know, a predominantly white teaching staff, you know. I even think about, and Carla talked about this earlier, just about the way in which, you know, to speak or to address, or, and even that, I mean, compared to other schools that I've worked at, I felt like we had some more freedoms. But even then, you know, there were moments where I can remember moments where white teachers misunderstood things that kids said, and like to a point of wanting to have like consequences and disciplinary action. One of the things that stands out for some reason was that somebody said, it's going to sound so ancient now because it's so part of pop culture, but somebody said something like, wrote RIP somewhere. And a teacher misunderstood that to be a term that's just used, I don't know, in the street. I don't really understand, but like it didn't have a place in school. And we're like, that just means rest in peace. Like there was some association that meant like gang culture or something. I don't know. Or street culture. I don't know. I still don't know. I just remember that the person was troubled by the use of RIP when we're talking about somebody who had passed away that was a Wheel student. And so we dealt with these things like in Band-Aids, but I think that this is the time now for people to, as we talk about us taking accountability, I think, you know, the staff needs to realize that there may be, and I don't know everybody that's there now at all, but I'm saying, you know, there may be some learning that they have to do to be able to facilitate these conversations in a school that's predominantly students of color.
I see some hands up, so I think it may be a good time to kind of open the floor. So I'm gonna remove the pins, and I think we can make this into a conversation. So I didn't see who went first, but Angel, you're at the top left, so you get to go first. And then I see you, Melanie.
Hi, Angel Cardona from 2014. So, you know, hi to the other Angel, and I'm very proud of you for participating in the conversation. It's a pretty important one. As Miss Rodriguez, which is what we called her back then, said, I was actually part of the stop and frisk expedition, and I have to admit that that was, I think, probably the first moment where I always felt separate from the Dominican community, but at the same time surrounded entirely by it my entire life since I moved into the Heights when I was 6 years old. And it was really interesting because that was the first moment where I was reminded really that I was Latino, but I was separate from Latino, and that I didn't feel uncomfortable when the police was around me across the street. And there were moments where I would instinctively say hi or nod my head to police, and they would say hi and nod their head back. But I didn't think that the friends around me that I had, which was, I think, everyone else, would have a completely different relationship. And since then, I've kind of approached it as like, this is my community. I may not be exactly Afro-Latino, but the contributions that the community has given to my life and Latino culture in general cannot be understated. So it was specifically because of things like that at Wheels and my experience there that I came into where I work now at a major company that's recently been acquisitioned by an even larger one. And I said, we have a Latinx ERG and a Black ERG, but we're forgetting that there's a huge intersection there, and that the Latino community has the largest Black community outside of Africa. Brazil has the second highest I think it is Nigeria. After Nigeria, Brazil has the second highest Black community in the world. So we got together, and there's been a lot of investment from our parent company and my main company to like have this rolling conversation about AfroLatinidad. And when I saw that Wheels was having it, it really excited me, because this conversation that we kind of brushed with the stop and frisk conversation is now finally starting to roll almost 10 years later, because my 10-year anniversary is coming up soon, into what it is to be Afro-Latino and like the impact that it has, and why some Latino students who are not Afro-Latino will have to come to that reckoning of, this is still my community, but at which point have I had a privilege in not experiencing it, and at which point have I had a privilege, I mean, this privilege of perpetuating it. So every day I work to remember that like Washington Heights and the Dominican community are my community, and I need to fight for it as well. But at the same time, to like step back and listen in situations like this.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate that. Melanie, I see you had your hand up too. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I would like to say, like, going back to what Angel said, Ms. Rodriguez, that like it's important like for teachers to know like how to handle situations like that, because like you would think that like the adult would like speak up and say something about that. And like even though Angel did speak up about it, the fact that he basically got like in trouble for it, or like had to have like a different conversation with the teacher about it, it like shows that like the teachers, they do need to like be able to like know how to like handle those type of situations. And like also like just learning more like for kids to know like that sometimes like they pick and choose like want to show like if they're like I don't really know how to explain it, but like some kids, they do pick and choose like want to show like their race, like one saying the N-word, like they might not identify as it, but they will say the N-word. So it's like if we was able to like learn more about like everything, like I feel like the environment would be like more safe into like having those conversations even in school. So like, other kids don't feel uncomfortable, or like if that happens, they know to speak up about it. Because sometimes when kids do say those stuff, some kids will just like laugh about it, or like just won't say nothing about it. So like just learning more about when to speak up and when to know when something is wrong. That's what
I think I also want to just jump back to what we were talking about before. I think that, one of the things that I'm excited about is, just to see your generation sort of really push push the door through the door and really make your voices heard. I think that one of the challenges in this country is that, we say this like that we want your authentic self. But there are so many systems that are already set up to not accept your authentic self. I think that, I can't let this conversation go by without saying that even in its inception of Wheels, the issues of race, ethnicity, and gender were at play. To be Dominican and a woman and a school administrator, often I was the only of those three things in the room. And it was challenging, and it was really trying to find that balance between being heard for things for you all, really, like for the students, like to make sure that we push things the way they needed to, and and honor it in both ways, right? Like honor the things that we wanted to prepare you all for, right? So when Carla talked about speaking a certain way, and there were certain things that were important, even though it wasn't because we didn't value you who you were as people, but we knew that we were sending you off to places like Wesleyan and other places where unfortunately people weren't going to make those allowances for you, I guess is the thing. And you know, that was a challenge. And I think that, and maybe I'm more cynical, I don't know. I think that part of it is, you know, we're in this moment in history where everyone everywhere is saying, you know, bring your authentic self, we accept you, but you know, I still sit in committees for interviewing people where I still hear, you know, some of these old things and old stereotypes about what makes a good teacher or not, or where are they coming from, what schools are they coming from, or so many of these things are still there. Like, I guess, you know, the struggle is to be enough part of the system so that you could get in and dismantle and break it down, you know. And that was our challenge back then. And you know, I still say to you all that there has to be ways that we do this strategically, but still do this with intention, you know. And part of that is with the Wheels community, starts with the Wheels community of staff members. But I just say that because I think that there were so many things that we tried to do that I know a lot of it doesn't always translate to you. Like, you don't always see what those things are. I guess for me, you know, being at Wheels was actually, it was a lot about, it was as much about you as it was about myself, because I was in your shoes. I was first generation. I tried to create an environment of what I didn't have, right? So in elementary school, I was very fortunate that I had all Latino teachers. And then after that, never again. So, you know, so much of it was trying to create a space that that you all would feel comfortable at any table that you sat in, you know, and making sure that you had those voices. And to this day, I feel like some of the conversations that you all had in some of your classes, and I know you guys are still having at Wheels in some of your classes, they don't rival, you know, at all. They don't compare to what's happening in some of the suburban districts. You know, your level of intellect, your level of intentionality, of discourse is far more powerful. And, you know, it's time that you guys, you know, really start to have those honest conversations with the Wheel staff members of like, okay, so we've done these things and they've been great, but we still need to continue the work. And from what I hear, I think that one of the goals is to increase the number of staff members of color. And I hear that has changed somewhat since I left.
Ooh, bottle that up, send it home. Thank you, Jenny. That's wonderful. Emmanuel, I saw you. Sorry we made you wait so long. I saw you had your hand up. I want you to to contribute what you've got.
Hi, my name is Emmanuel. I don't know if I could top any of what's being said right now, because I think it covered a lot of strong stuff. But I'm like pure Dominican and stuff, and I've always prided myself of being Dominican. And after seeing like both school systems in DR and here, I've always felt like a lot of the change from my perspective has to start with the homeland itself, in my opinion. Like, I've always felt like our community is so tight and stuff, like that we have such a big voice to be able to put such a message towards others, like, and set like some things in stone. Like, for example, us Dominicans, we have been prided on like being a mixed race and stuff, like being, I guess, black and white, but always had the mentality like that, like to embrace, I guess, the whiteness of it or whatever. and just ignore like the whole other side of it. Ignore the the black, I guess I don't want to say blackness because that sounds very ugly, but I guess the black culture within us, right? And honestly, it's honestly like, well, I can't. I'm sorry. My like I had so many ideas and then just everyone like kind of said them all, but like I don't. I'm not really like how do I say this? Like it's tough to say really what it like to like spread the message of what it really means to be a Dominican. I feel that's like an idea that should be cemented in our schools all throughout. And it's a message that I feel like is strong enough that should be pushed all the way back into DR itself. Because more like at least I've started in my own home since I was little, always pushing that idea like that we're all equal. Like it doesn't matter. Like for example, like my parents always say like good hair or bad hair. That's something that that's always bugged me. For example, I've hated like, oh, you have good hair. I'm like, I, I just have hair, you know. I've never liked that, you know, that they've tried to like categorize stuff and just say that something's better than something else. It's never made sense. So I don't. I hope that's a contribution of some sort. Thank you for listening.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think part of what you were saying, part of one of the threads that I think I got out of that was something that came up in the meeting that we all had together as a group before this, which was, you know, learning how and when to explore your own identity is really different depending on, you know, how supportive the family environment might be, how supportive the community around you might be. So yeah, we're all in, you know, many folks are in different spots, so that makes total sense. So we're at 4 minutes before 6:30, and I don't want to hold people up from the dinner, but I just wanted to give, you know, folks who haven't had a chance to ask a question or comment to do so. I know the chat has been active as well, and I'm so grateful for that. So, but for folks that haven't had a chance to speak at the podium, I want to give you a chance to.
I guess I'll share something back to the point about that Jenny was making about bringing your authentic self again. I've been following a lot of members of this community on TikTok called Corporate TikTok. Like, I'm just so interested in like, just like, you know, like workplace operations these days, especially with like us millennials slash Gen Zers kind of like changing what that looks like, and in light of the pandemic as well. And this one guy I follow, he says that one thing he used to struggle with and sometimes still does struggle with when it comes to being his authentic self at work. And for context, he's also a brown man who is Dominican, also has like a big beard, which, you know, some companies are partial to that. And he was saying that some things that he would do, like whenever his white coworkers would ask about his weekend, he would lie and say that he would listen to like Bruce Springsteen or like went out for a run, you know, things that have been known to be quote unquote white, you know. 'Cause I'm a runner, and back in the day, I used to think running was a white sport. I thought going to Starbucks was a white thing to do. Like, yeah, I thought yoga was white, you know, like it's just like the way that it was like instilled in us. But he was just saying that one way to bring authentic self to work is you can say that you were smoking hookah on the weekends and having a bottle of Henny, right? That's what you did on the weekend. Just because it doesn't relate to what your coworkers may have been doing doesn't, you know, that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just we come from different backgrounds and different places. So just wanted to share that when it comes to being your authentic self, is not just only like the way you physically present, but just about even little things that you have to lie about. Like, you know, you shouldn't have to do that at work. And being in the job market again, I would say that I'm in a privileged place where I can be even more picky about the types of jobs I want, and like notice like little red flags, like about, you know, we're family here, or like, you know, like we have this work hard, play hard culture. Like I can just see like little red flags that kind of bring up some traumas of how I've been treated in other jobs and the way that they've tried to mask it in order to present the job in a better way to you. So yeah, I just wanted to share that it's just all about like being your authentic self is just not about a look, but it's just even like the life that you live in front of your colleagues or peers.
Hey Carla, just real quick, I know that we're almost at time. Which there's the corporate talk again, but the as someone currently in a corporate space that is pretty large, I have to say, and just keeps growing, it is that part of bringing your authentic self is important, the positive aspect. I also thought that like things like Trader Joe were white and things like that. So growing up, we've had the same thought, but part of also bringing your authentic self that's really hard in a corporate workspace and takes a lot of bravery is actually going up to managers and saying, I don't see a lot of people like me. And we need to address that because especially I think in a place like this, it's hard to feel like it's a safe thing to do. Recently I did tell my manager that, hey, I feel like we had very high turnover because of how things have been, but we've replaced everyone with people that look exactly the same. This is like 5 people. And I was sitting on that for a while and I thought, I have to actually say it. And then right now we're working on a public facing recruitment event to get more Latinos into the company because we realize that there are very few, especially in creative spaces. So I think that step of bringing your authentic self is like, yes, your personality, but also what you worry about, because then you can actually start not only bringing yourself in, but allowing others to bring themselves in. Because if you just talk about what you did and what you had fun on the weekend, sure, they'll start talking about what they did and what they had fun with. But then can they bring in their authentic selves with how they feel in the workplace and whether they feel appreciated? So I think really important conversation there that we can have hours of talk about. But
yeah, so Carla, so yeah, so you wanna bring us home?
I'll be OD quick.
No, all good, all good. Take your time. Take your time.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Angel. I definitely agree. And just one last thing I wanted to say. This goes for you know, the Black and Brown community and you know, people that come from ethnic backgrounds, pronunciation about like when it comes to your name. So like sometimes I feel like we also try to whiten our name like Carla Arroyo. Nah, I'd be rolling them R's, Carla Arroyo. You know, like be proud of your name and don't whiten it because it just sounds better for your white coworkers. Like I think I read somewhere that I see this happening in the Asian community. They'll have names that maybe some Americans won't be able to pronounce and they'll just name themselves Jack, but their real name is actually something very ethnic. And just because we can't pronounce it doesn't mean that you should hide it. Even if your last name has 25 letters, pronounce that with pride, you know? Like I just don't like that sometimes we even have to hide our identities when it comes to that. And there's even been studies about how people have changed their name on their resumes to apply to jobs, and they'll get more calls back when they whiten their name versus when they use like their actual name or even location. Like at one point, I had an HR manager told me that she told me to hide my middle name because it just wasn't professional. My middle name is Irene, and she just said, she's like, no, that's not like, that doesn't look good. And I believed it and I erased it. So, you know, just moving forward, I've just learned to like be proud of myself. And if you can't accept me as an employer, then I do not need to be working for you, because those little microcosms, they will present themselves in bigger ways later on, and I'm going to end up hating my job. So I pay attention to like those little things. That's it.
So I just want to thank Jenny, Carla, Angel, and where'd you go? Is she still here? Did Joely have to go? Oh no, there you are. Sorry, you've moved around on my screen, so you had to leave and come back. So there you are. Thank you all so much for being our panelists, and thank you everyone else that participated. This certainly is what we wanted to accomplish and have this be an actual community conversation. So thank you all so much for sharing your stories with us and for your participation. And hey, we'll be back in a month. I don't have an exact date yet, but Gil Vasquez, who's the CEO of the Keith Haring Foundation, is going to be facilitating next time on unique challenges that first-gen students from again, non-white communities face as they go to college. So be on the lookout for that invite. And thanks everyone. Have a great night. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.